Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, it's good to be here. I often get asked to speak about disruptive technologies. I'm co-founder of the Center for Disruptive Technologies. I'll tell you a little bit later about what that is and how that's making an impact across the continent. But I don't often get to just tell my story. So it's really a privilege to just be able to tell you my story and how I got to this place today. As Tati said, I consider myself to be an ordinary person who has managed to do extraordinary things. I have and am having an extraordinary life. I've raised over $1 billion for investment in various projects in sub-Saharan Africa over the 20 years that I've been here, and I've had primary and secondary impact on over 1 million people. And I count. I count by wealth creation, and I count by the number of sustainable jobs that I help to create. So I don't believe that everything that matters can be counted, but I do think that if we're talking about being social impact investors, counting the things that we can count is important. And so I wanted to talk to you today about really what I believe is the secret to my success. I don't believe that I'm any smarter than anybody else. I work hard, but I don't think it's just about working hard. And so I wanted to talk to you about synchronicity. So synchronicity is a concept that was really founded by Carl Jung. And it really just describes this simultaneous occurrence of events which seem significant and which they don't have a discernible causal relationship. And for the last 20 years, I've been thinking about my life. I ruminate. I examine what it is that I'm doing because I'm concerned about the impact. So I'm constantly calibrating and saying, is this working? Is that not working? Let me change this. And so what I've been studying is not external technology. We tend to think of technology as being software and machines, but I've been studying the technology which is really the most sophisticated technology on the planet, which is the technology that's between your ears. So we know that the human brain is the most significant machine on planet Earth. And I've been, to say passionate would be an understatement, probably a little bit obsessed with understanding how my thinking and my being impacts my capacity to impact others. So Oprah, I had the privilege of sitting in on an interview where Oprah was being interviewed by Patty Sellers. She was a former editor of Time magazine, and she asked Oprah how she defined power. And Oprah said, I define power as the capacity to impact with purpose. And I was like, whoa, I'm taking that, Oprah. I'm going to use that. So I'm interested in power. I'm interested in the capacity to impact with purpose. You can call me a serial entrepreneur. You can call me whatever. Just call me, because that's what I'm interested in. Okay? And so I get to take a sort of a quick journey through my life. Like I said, I've been studying synchronicity in my own life and how through service and compassion, which is a common theme. I feel like really my talk has already been laid out for me this morning because almost every person who spoke this morning has some touch points in my talk. And so through service and compassion, I've been able to create these pivots, and I've been able to do it over and over again. And those pivots allow me to really go off into a completely different trajectory. So one small pivot in life can send you someplace that you never thought was possible. And what I'm sharing with you today is how I keep creating those pivots over and over again. So I'm going to take you back. I was in university in the 80s, early 80s, so that gives you, I'm giving you a date stamp, okay, so that you can do the math. A lot of times I teach at UCT, and a lot of times my students are like, Dr. McPherson, how did you do all of this in this short period of time? It's not that short of a period of time, okay? So it really started with this gentleman. His name is Randall Robinson, and he was the founder of Trans-Africa. So back in the 80s, I became involved with Trans-Africa, and much like many of the youth in South Africa today. I was busy toying and doing all kinds of things. I probably should have been studying more, but I was an activist. And so, one of the great things about going to jail is that you really meet a lot of cool people in jail. It's very cool. All right? And so by serving and being involved with TransAfrica, that led me to meet that gentleman. So the only gentleman, the only white guy in this picture is an amazing man. His name is Jack Greenberg. So when I got to Columbia University School of Law, I started working for Jack Greenberg, who is this Pan-African jurist. He was a titan. You see him there with all these civil rights activists. He was also in jail and doing all kinds of stuff. And so he started the Legal Defense Fund. He was really one of the first lawyers for the NAACP. For those of you who may not know, that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and that was one of the key organizations that we utilized as African Americans during our own fight against racial oppression in the United States. And so Jack Greenberg, to work for Jack Greenberg was just like the coolest thing ever. So I went to Columbia University School of Law, worked for Jack Greenberg, and I served. So for those of you who have ever worked for a professor, you know that you're basically like a flunky. You like wash dishes, you cook, you do whatever. So I was in Jack Greenberg's apartment. I was literally chopping crudité for a party that they were hosting that night. And then I met these two gentlemen serving. Every time I've had an incredible pivot in my life, it has been because I've stepped up to the plate and I've volunteered and I serve. So George Bezos came into the kitchen, and I hadn't seen George Bezos since those pictures of the treason trial back in the 50s. And so, he walked in, he's very stately, he rolls up his sleeves, he doesn't introduce himself, and he starts cutting the vegetables with me, and he never introduces himself. And we get into this huge debate about post-apartheid constitutional jurisprudence. And he said, wow, you're really passionate. You should come to South Africa. And I said, George, by the time he'd introduced, I said, George, that'd be really, really interesting, but you all can't afford me. I had a 6-year-old daughter. I'm divorced. I was a single mother. I was trying to pay back that Columbia University School of Law debt. And so I was working on Wall Street at the time, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. So in any event, George Bezos and Madiba introduced me to this gentleman. You may not recognize him, but that's Albie Sachs, another incredible jurist. So, when something is for you, a lot of times it just doesn't go away. You meet random people on the street who come up to you and say, you should go to South Africa. And you're like, what? Do I know you? Why are you talking to me like this? And so it just kept happening. It was absolutely amazing. So finally, I said, you know what? This is one of those pivots. Let me go. And off I went, and then my life just went into a completely different, direction. And I was, for better or for worse, I was involved with mortgage-backed securitizations, and I was doing subprime stuff. Can you imagine if I'd stayed doing that? I mean, I'm not dissing anybody, but, that was not where you wanted to be. That was not what you wanted to be doing. So I had a pivot. I came to South Africa. I clerked for Albie Sachs at the Constitutional Court, and I worked as a volunteer for 2 years with a daughter. My daughter was 6 when I came. So I was supposed to come, take a sabbatical. I ended up staying at the Constitutional Court for 2 years because during the 96 elections, the IEC came and they grabbed all the researchers from the Constitutional Court. So I stayed, and then I helped to train a whole new batch. And it was incredible because, Albie Sachs would come into the chambers and he'd be like, can you pick up the Dalai Lama from the airport? Like, yeah, I can do that. Sure. It was just amazing, the people who I had an opportunity to meet just by serving at the Constitutional Court. Was it hard work? Yes, it was hard work because I was working and we had really big cases that was coming before the court. So this was serious business. And I had a daughter. I didn't have any family that was here, so it was just the two of us. And I wasn't making any money, right? And finally, I put my foot down because I used to be paying for my own parking at the Constitutional Court. And I was like, wait a minute, I shouldn't be paying for my own parking. So through serving at the court, I then went back into banking. I raised a bunch of capital. We were raising about $250 million for what was going to be one of the first women-focused funds in Africa, and we had invested a lot of money. I'd invested a lot of the money that I'd made when I worked on Wall Street doing those things that were not so sustainable. And the market tanked. This was 2008. And we raised about $20 million, and we couldn't get to the $25 million that we needed to break escrow on a $250 million fund because nobody was investing in sub-Saharan Africa. Money was flying out of emerging markets, even though we didn't have anything to do with the global financial crisis. So why are we being penalized for that here? But that's what happened. And then Nomsa Daniels, who was working with Mam Grasa, called me and she said, listen, I want to set up a meeting between you two because we know what you were trying to do with the Wedi Fund. That went on, by the way, to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And so even though it was a really big public failure, a lot of good still came out of it. So I began working with Grasa Michelle and was one of the founding members of New Faces and New Voices. To make a long story short, I met Hillary Clinton, did a whole bunch of stuff with a whole bunch of women in the United States who ended up funding some of the other stuff that I'll tell you about later. But with New Faces and New Voices, again, serving. I did 22 countries for New Faces and New Voices on my own dime because I care about investing differently in women in Africa. So it wasn't about what was I going to get out of this. It was about what can I give? What do I have to give? Okay, so you need somebody to go and talk about raising capital for this big, amazing idea you have. I'll do that. And that was another pivot because through that work, a whole bunch of other stuff happened. So I went to the African Development Bank, and to make a long story short, I got $50 million for investing in a number of funds through New Faces and New Voices. So African Women Speak was an idea that I came up with, and Donald Kaberuka, who was president of the African Development Bank at the time, said, well, why are you just limiting this to 10 million women? Why don't we try to have this reach 50 million African women? I was like, cool, I'm down with that. Let's go. Yeah, write the check. We can do it. And so it was, again, through service. It wasn't about sort of how much money am I going to make. Do I make money? Yes. I like all the good things everybody else likes. So I'm not suggesting that being a successful serial impact entrepreneur means that you take a vow of poverty. What I'm suggesting is that if you show up and you serve, then you will create synchronous events in your life, and you will accelerate your capacity to impact people. So 10 to the 9th, that's 1 billion people. That's what I'm after. So that's my wager with Peter Diamandis, and I'll tell you how I got to know him. I love this woman. I look at this picture and my corks start going like, woo. This is Wendy Lahabe. Wendy Lahabe and I, we sit on a board together, and then after I stepped down from the board of New Faces and New Voices, I thought, whoa, I'm done. You know how you reach that milestone? You're like, I'm good, okay. I'm going to go to heaven for sure. Now, I've worked off all that Wall Street karma. I'm good. You know what I mean? And so, but I wasn't done. I'm not done. And so I sit on a board with Wendy Lahabe. Again, serving. This is a board. It's a global organization called United Success. We don't get paid to be on the board. We just give, and we create networks, and it's all kinds of amazing women, and all kinds of incredible things happen. I had met Wendy, even though we sit on this board. The organization is based in the Netherlands. We got together, and we were just like, why don't we know each other? We started talking. I teach project finance at the University of Cape Town. Oh, by the way, it was Mam Grasa who was just like, you need to go teach. And so I ended up teaching, which you'll see how that's led to me being here. So Wendy Lahabe and I start talking. We start talking about what I teach, which is project finance. I also have served on a high-level UN committee that deals with the nexus sustainable water, energy, and food systems. So mark that, because that's important to how I got right to this place today. We start talking, and she says, well, this stuff sounds interesting. I don't know anything about infrastructure, but talk to me about why you're so passionate about it. And I'm like, you know, the built environment can either unlock new patterns of wealth creation, or it can bake in historical patterns of injustice. So the fact that South Africans have to spend the majority of their time and income on transportation because of apartheid era spatial design is a problem. So part of why I teach is because I'm an economic activist, and it's part of giving back. She says, let's do something. We get together and we work tirelessly for the last 3 years, and today we have only just put up our website a couple of days ago. We're still iterating. It's winde.africa. It is today already the largest women's infrastructure investment consortium in Africa. We have over 3,000 members. And it's African women. Please, you can give me love, yay! But it's actually really not me. It's service. And through service, creating synchronicity. And synchronicity brings that constellation of amazing people into your life. Because none of this is just me. I'm showing you all these pictures of all these cool people I get to hang out with, because without them, nobody would even talk to me, right? So it's showing up and serving, and that serving brings you into contact with people, and then you get together because you've got your transformative purpose and they've got theirs, and you get together and that magic happens. And that's how you get it done. So, all right, so I mentioned I teach at the University of Cape Town. I teach project finance. I went to the United Nations. Again, I volunteered. I sat on a high-level committee that does public-private partnership research, because smart people are concerned about globally what's happening with our planet and looking at how do we harness the power of sustainable PPPs to make life better. And then I got involved with the idea of the nexus. Through that, I went and I advised on this bottom picture, which is the green, on one of the largest new smart city projects that's happening in South Africa. It's called Finningley, and it's going to be in KZN. And through that, I wrote to like 5 billionaires, and I told them what it was that I was doing, and I said I wanted to go to Singularity University. And then one of those billionaires wrote me back and said, okay. And then they paid for me to go to Singularity University, and there I studied, and I went to through the GSP program. I was one of the first persons to graduate from Singularity University. I met Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil and all the folks that we know, right, Kello? And then my life just had another pivot, which is how I ended up standing here. And then that's the Women in Infrastructure Development and Energy. I would not have even been doing that if I wasn't teaching. Because if I wasn't teaching, which trust me, if anybody here is a teacher, you know that's all about service, right? So because I was teaching, I got asked to go to the UN, and because of that, I started advising on these smart city projects. And then because of that, I got to Singularity University, and then I got to the Windy Consortium. And now, I mean, the Windy Consortium is just going, it's amazing. So how did I get here? Okay, so now what I'm doing is something called the Center for Disruptive Technology. So I went to Singularity University. I wanted to study all about next generation water, food, and energy solutions so I could bring that back to the projects that I've been working on in sub-Saharan Africa, and really right here at home. South Africa is my adopted home, my adopted country. And so basically what I'm doing now is I'm disrupting Singularity University because I'm a disruptive person. And that's why they invited me there in the first place. So what am I about now? So like I said, I'm a serial social impact entrepreneur. So once something really starts working, I then turn my attention to something else, because that's what I do best. I ideate, and I bring together the right constellations, and then I help to create platforms for other people. So I'm an enabler. I'm an equipper. I'm a person who spends a lot of time inspiring and breathing life into other people's dreams, and I love that. And that's how I'm able to have so much impact, because it's not just about me and what it is that I'm about, but it's also about using my time, my energy, my resources to pour into other people to say, how can I help you to get your game on. So that's what CDT is about. So we have already over 1,000 disruptive ideators from about 14 markets in sub-Saharan Africa doing nothing but this kind of stuff all day and coming up with grand solutions to grand challenges. I'm an Afrofuturist. And it's about creating African solutions for African challenges. And I don't even know where this is going because I can't keep up with all the stuff that's coming out of this already, because it's just a bunch of disruptive, incredible people. And so we're creating a launch pad, we're creating a mobile makerspace, we've created something called Future School, we're helping big companies, we're helping small companies, we're talking to governments about all kinds of stuff, we're having speaker salons, and so we've just gotten started. We already have a relationship with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with the Center for Collective Knowledge, because we want to create an African-wide workspace, a collaborative workspace, where people who want to literally work on complex ideas have a platform for doing that, leveraging the power of disruptive technologies to really make life better for people across the continent in a whole bunch of ways. And so that's how I got here. And so at some point, I want to have all of these incredible ideators be able to tell their own stories. So I got to tell my story today, but there are some amazing stories. And I think that telling our story is not just our right, it's our responsibility, right? So I just wanted to end with these kind of takeaways for you. And that's just to start with what you care about deeply. Don't channel anybody else, channel you, right? Get in touch with what it is that you really care about deeply. And so Salim Ismail, who was one of the founders of Singularity University, wrote a book called Exponential Africa, along with Yuri Van Geest and a bunch of other cool guys. And I really think it's a good book. And in that book, they talk about how organizations, in order for them to be exponential organizations and to have exponential impact, that they need to have a massive transformative purpose. And so I've adapted that. Another tidbit, if somebody does something really cool, just borrow it. It's okay. Right? So I said, let's have an MTPP, because I think you need to have a massive transformative personal purpose, right? So if you want to know what is really sort of the rocket fuel that's going to launch you and allow you to really have 10 to the 9th impact, have your own massive transformative personal purpose. And then show up and volunteer. I mean, my parents were civil rights activists, so that kind of activism, public service runs deep in my family. And I know that sometimes it's hard to do that when you're really just trying to make ends meet yourself. But that's okay. Do it anyway, and just see what happens. Take the hero's walk. I would be lying if I said to you that hard isn't hard. Hard is hard sometimes. But that's what the hero's journey is all about. Take it, stay on it, stay the course, model human excellence, and expect that synchronicity is going to show up in your life, and be prepared when it does. Last slide. Yesterday, they called it coincidence. Today, it's synchronicity. Tomorrow, they're going to call it skill. Cheers.